Welcome and good day to you. In this video, I will talk about the presence of an alien algorithm hiding behind each and every word in Quranic text. The term alien I used here concerned with a very sophisticated linguistic technology, something not exist as human invention anywhere on earth when the Quranic text was revealed to Prophet Muhammad. It is also something that should not be able to hide behind a 7th century text if it was produced by human alone. As humans, we knew ourselves as limited to read text from side to side or up and down. But why we settle to justify that it is the only way that God intended His message for us? If we're certain there is no other way in reading the Holy Scriptures, isn't this an injustice from our part? Should we underestimate God by our own perception of language? Should we limit and frame God's words to our will and desire? I personally think that this shouldn't be the case. As an evolving species, I think we should live up to great assumptions we held about God. We should have faith that side to side or up and down is not the only way God intended His text to be understood. Following such faith, we should also realize that human language is simply the creation of humans themselves. We made the consensus on words and sound, or the direction on how they should be read and understood. A consensus or agreement which is variably beautiful among ourselves. But when we look up to the natural world, we realize that our language variation is only a small diversity compared to how rich plants and animals communicate. A single bee or fish can dance elegantly in three-dimensional space to convey all sorts of information to their swarms. Plants also grow in so many arrangements of shapes, spacing and angle relative to the sun, even also in respect of other animals. Compared to plant and animals, our simplicity in language evolved out of the need to ease communication between different cultures or society. But simpler language doesn't always mean less amount of information. Poetry is a clear statement to the need of having high volume of information within our limited words and phrases. Beyond the specific domain of poetry, desire for multiple meaning or many interpretation is in fact a universal behavior. It is deep rooted in our brain as a mechanism of how our perception works, and even similarly expressed across different languages. As an example, beside the combustion of substance, the word fire is also a symbol for intense passion. Another example would be the word hand, which is accepted in many cultures as a mention of action or involvement. While the word fruit is also perceived in many societies as a reference for result or product. Now imagine, apart from all words and phrases that may serve as metaphor, there is also another forms of perception which commonly escaped our attention. This forms of perception is the algorithmic perception of language. Algorithms form the basis of our mind, as things in our brain is not stored in linear fashion. But algorithm in text is rarely perceived consciously, as we doesn't lead or dance with our language. We read our words from side to side and one by one, in a fixed order of sequence. To be convinced that such unusual method of reading is required to read the text of Revelation, we might need reason or motive stronger than simple curiosity. Taking example of Quran as our focus of analysis, the perspective of coherency or harmonious relation between one verse with another will be the reason. Does the interconnected logic among different Quranic verses reflect the quality of a flawless moral guidance? Our short question, is it free from imperfect human judgment? Or does it free from false perception? Or does the main problem is located in ourselves, on how we read, react and respond to it? Is it possible that our understanding is shaped by our own assumption? One interesting Quranic keyword is the term polytheist or mushrikeen, which is a keyword commonly understood as people who worship many gods. Within a specific perspective of monotheism, the concept of polytheism is commonly associated with negative assumption. Whether this assumption is true or inevitable require further discussion beyond our current topic. But one certain thing is that the Quranic text is more concerned about concrete behavior rather than a conceptual dispute. Regarding the word polytheist, this Quranic tendency is reflected in the 137th verse of the 6th or the capital chapter. This specific verse highlights the killing of children as an evil behavior associated with the term polytheism. While this wisdom is crystal clear, there seems to be a common ignorance of the same lesson from other places in Quran. This occurrence is the story of Prophet Moses and a man known as Khiddir, which is a name given later from outside Quranic vocabulary. Starting from the 18th chapter of the cave on its 65th verse, Moses and Khiddir began a journey where at some point Khiddir commit an evil by killing an innocent kid in the 18th chapter and 74th verse. Recorded in details, a careful reader would notice that there is 3 different forms of self-mention used by Khiddir from the 79th to the 82nd verse inside the 18th chapter. Khiddir is recorded as using the word fa'aradtu, or I intended, in explaining to Moses why he damaged the ship of a poor fisherman. Then he used the word fa'aradna, or we intend, on explaining why he killed an innocent kid. Last, he used the phrase fa'arada rabbuka, or so intended your Lord, on explaining why he helped rebuild a wall for 2 orphan kids. All these subtle text variation is more than just an ornament or part of literary art. The use of particle we by Khiddir in his own action of killing an innocent kid is a Quran implicit warning for the dangers of mental problems. Specifically, the reference for mental problems is made against the disorders of multiple personality. While someone may manage more than one personality, which is harmless or non-offensive, Quran seems to warn against the neurological threat of unknowingly nurturing an evil or deceitful subconscious. This dangerous personality is one of the essence of what the terms polytheist originally intended by Quranic message. As we remember, the phrase fa'arada rabbuka, or your Lord's intent, on the story of 2 orphan kids is the only good deeds to others on the journey of Moses and Khiddir. This is a clear message that the keyword of Lord or God is intended in the context of good or benevolent act to others. It also contains philosophy that we should not use the keyword Lord or God as a devotion to any evil action towards any innocent being. The same principle also applies to an example of polytheistic beliefs, example where some forms of devotion to a destructive figure was made to avert its destructive power rather than to support it. But what about the 65th verse of the 18th chapter, which described Khiddir as a man given knowledge by the angels? While sinking a boat without any casualty might be acceptable, does the claim of knowledge of a future event justify the killing of an innocent child? Unexpected guidance over these questions surprisingly came from algorithmic methods of reading the Quran. Algorithmic reading means that we are not imprisoned by the custom of reading text side to side or up and down. Without chained to these spatial constraints, numbers would then be our new navigator. As we remember that Khiddir is first introduced in the 65th verse of the 18th chapter by the keyword abdan, or servant. This keyword belongs to the tree Ain Badal, or ABD, which occurs 275 times within 251 different verses in the entire Quran. Tree root is a unique combination of 3 consonant letters. It is a structural composition which constructs most single words in the entire Quranic text as well as the Arabic language. Besides the keywords of slave or servant or abdan in Arabic, this ABD tree root also derives the word worship or ubudu, which is another central concept in the vocabulary of Quran. If we read Quranic text by the order of the ABD tree root, we will find that 65th verse of the 18th chapter is located exactly at the 100th entry of the ABD tree root. The next nearest verse containing another word from ABD tree root is the 102nd verse of the 18th chapter. There is a difference of 37 between the index of 65 and 102. If we add this 37 to the previous number of 100, we would get the number 137. As we recall previously, 137 is the exact index in chapter 6, an index of the only place where the word polytheist, the word killing, and the word children occurs together in the entire 6,236 Quranic verse. And if we read Quran by the order of the ABD tree root, the subsequential verse of 65, 102 and 110 inside chapter 18 will give us a completely different perspective over the name Khiddir from our previous story. This new perspective is where Khiddir, as a man given knowledge by the angel, is not a good example at all to be followed by Prophet Moses. This different view is a Quranic hidden lesson which emphasizes that any knowledge of the future doesn't justify the committing of any evil act in the present. This would also imply that knowledge of the future is never a valid 100% truth, or that it is never set in stone before its time. Another keyword of disbeliever or kafaru in verse 102 on chapter 18 add another implicit lesson about faith and rationality. It suggests that any single word in Quran has its own alternate reality, which deserves a neutral, logical, contextual and critical thinking to be translated into our everyday life. If Moses does not openly declare his impatience and disbelief to Khiddir, he would then be silently declaring exactly the same thing to God Almighty. In relation to the concept of worship, this inspires us that all kinds of faith can be potentially self-deceptive, especially in the absence of open-minded rationality or the absence of devotion to benevolence. The obvious logic of Khiddir as an evil example in child murder should be easy to accept despite its common ignorance. But the semantic of child murder as one of the essence of polytheism may still cast doubt on some critical and curious mind. Casting some light on this doubt, a deeper numerical examination is given on the screen. To get a better look, the video can be paused or played frame by frame. The idea behind these numbers is that each single word in Quranic text is connected to each other in a very complicated way. This word's matrix is exponentially complex that today's computer programming is not anywhere near producing something similar to Quranic text. It is because such effort would also require a leap in neuroscience, or the understanding of how our brain works, together with the laws of physics on time and space, as well as God permission by all means of logic and probability. Numerical address of each verse became one of the important data, the chronological order of each verse, the set of different tree root, distance between any two words, any morphological variation, phrasal variety, frequency of duplicated words, and many more, each play its own mysterious puzzle inside the Quran. And all these numbers also exist in a complex connection with the semantic or the conceptual meaning of the words. Layers of complexity from the semantic perspective is even more amazing. Example words like hope and fear is classified intricately in a taxonomy configured by distinct mathematical description against another set of words like doubt and belief. In short, Quranic algorithm seems to have done a very complicated work using Arabic language in the ancient 7th century, what we have not done to any human language in today's 21st century. All these only lead to a certain conclusion that intelligence being other than human must have involved in the revelation of Quran in the ancient past. An involvement on encoding and transmission of enormous information, far beyond what we limit to see and understand from its medium or the selected person of which it came to be transformed and spoken. Returning to the screen, we would see that our suspicion of Khiddir as a bad example seems to be proven by many numerical expressions. Instead of abstract personal difference on the worship of God, the killing of innocent child seems to be formulated numerically as one uniquely Quran concrete definition for polytheism, as well as a universally accepted evil for all mankind. This hard evidence should lead ordinary Quran reader to review or consider that there maybe have been also misunderstanding of many other familiar Quranic terms or words, which is simply the result of our limited perception or humane judgment. A millennia and 100 years of perception should not obstruct us from pursuing a better logic or more rational view on the ancient text of Quran, as the age of computers was only with us for at least the last 50 years. And if we ignore all this 7th century numerical impossibility, we will also ignore the fact that the intelligent being which made it possible must have come through an unimaginable distance from our Earth with their highly advanced technology. We should also remember another Quranic story of how Abraham's father burned his own son as symbolical separation. This is an event which marks a transition of time period in Western Asia between his father polytheism into Abraham monotheism. Then we should also be aware of how many of us probably still fail in getting the correct message from the next no less tricky lesson, where Abraham then turned to sacrifice his own son as compliance to God. This is a repeating psychological test for our ability to dissociate an honorable character against their dishonorable action to arrive at our own rational and independent moral judgment. Taking all these as symbolical role-playing and metaphor of human conflict, it's the right direction that these series of warning should lead us to begin viewing religious texts as trials of rationality instead of trials of blind obedience. It is a test for the development of logic and moral value for our species against any harmful personality disorder over the life and death of our own kind. Is a period of human history warned by all religious scriptures. Quran also contains secret warning over our own increasing footprint and power over nature. However, our current video is only one drop of an unknown ocean of numerical information hiding behind Quranic text. Anyway, I hope this video is somehow useful, not disappointing, or at least will lead to other helpful material related to the topic. So don't forget to like, subscribe, follow your interest, and thank you for listening.